Today we're going to look through the first 5 chapters of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. The first chapter is titled Tricky Tom. So Tom was always getting into trouble, and so when Tom should have been getting ready to go to school, Aunt Polly found Tom in the closet eating jam. Now Aunt Polly was mad. Tom was, of course, always getting into trouble. He was so good at it. Now before Tom got into trouble, he dashed out the door and over the fence. Now Aunt Polly raised Tom as her own. She thought it was time for him to do grown-up things since Tom was always getting into trouble. Now that weekend, Aunt Polly made Tom paint the fence. Tom could not believe that he had to work on such a beautiful Saturday. There was no school. It was a beautiful day. Would you want to work on Saturday painting a fence? Tom didn't. Tom was always getting into trouble, but Tom had an idea. Tom's friend Ben was walking down the street. He was going swimming. Ben watched as Tom painted the fence. He tried to ask Tom why he was working on such a beautiful Saturday, but Tom pretended not to hear him. Ben tried talking to Tom again. This time, Tom looked at Ben and said he was having fun painting the fence, that it wasn't work at all. Well, Ben wasn't so sure. Tom was always getting into trouble, so Tom pretended that painting the fence was so much fun that Ben joined in. Again, Tom was always getting into trouble. Instead of doing the work himself, he ended up talking all of his friends into painting the fence for him. The boys even paid Tom to paint the fence, since Tom made it look like so much fun. Do you think you would have helped Tom paint the fence? Chapter 2, Tom's Lessons in Love. Everyone wanted to be Huck Finn. He didn't have to go to school. He didn't have to take a bath, and he could always go fishing. On his way to school, Tom met up with Huck. Huck had a cat and a box with him. Tom wanted to know what was in the box. Well, it was a tick. Tom wanted it and traded it for a tooth that he lost that morning. But unlike Huck, Tom had to go to school. He had to say goodbye to Huck. Everybody wanted to be Huck Finn. At school, Tom came in late. He got in trouble and the teacher made him sit with the girls in the class. That was okay with Tom. He got to sit beside the girl of his dreams, Becky. Tom tried to get Becky's attention, but she pretended not to care. Then he offered her a peach, and she took it. Becky and the other girls watched Tom draw instead of paying attention to his teacher. Tom promised to teach Becky how to draw at lunch. Then Tom smiled and wrote, "I love you," on his blackboard. Tom loved Becky. At lunch, Tom asked if Becky wanted to be engaged to him, because Tom loved Becky. Becky was not sure what it meant to be engaged. So Tom told Becky that you agree only to love and marry that person. All you have to do is say, "I love you," and kiss. Well, Becky wasn't sure about the kiss. She agreed and told Tom she loved him, and he kissed her on the lips. Well, Tom said that Becky now had to hold his hand, walk with him home into school, and talk with him at parties. Becky thought that was nice. While talking about being engaged, Tom slipped and told Becky that he was engaged to Amy. Well, Becky got upset and started to cry. Well, to stop her from crying, Tom gave her a gift. She refused the gift, and Tom left. Becky then wished she would have taken the gift, but it was too late. Chapter 3, Midnights in the Graveyard, an adventure for Tom. After coming home from school, Tom went to bed and waited until it was late. Then he went downstairs to meet up with Huck Finn. They were going to the graveyard. Tom and Huck were planning on to find some devils. Tom and Huck are best friends. Showing that they're best friends, in the graveyard they talked quietly and waited for the devils to show up. Instead of devils, they heard men talking. Tom recognized one. His name was Injun Joe. The other 2 men were Muff Potter and Dr. Robinson. Tom and Huck hid and watched the men. They watched as the 3 men took a shovel and started digging. Once the job was done, Muff demanded more money. Dr. Robinson refused, and the 2 started to fight. See, Injun Joe did not like Dr. Robinson. Dr. Robinson was the one who put Injun Joe in the jail. So Injun Joe watched the 2 men fight, and then when Muff got knocked out, Injun Joe killed the doctor. Instead of taking the blame, Injun Joe put the knife in Muff's hand and made him believe he killed Dr. Robinson. Well, scared, Tom and Huck ran away. They were best friends, but they're scared. So chapter 4, after the death of Dr. Robinson, we see Muff Potter being accused. Tom and Huck ran home. They couldn't tell anyone where they'd been. So Tom and Huck made a promise. They would tell no one what they had seen. They wrote a promise not to tell anyone on a piece of wood, and Tom and Huck signed it in blood. They had made a promise. Now, would you have told someone what you had seen if you were Tom and Huck? Now remember, Tom and Huck made a promise, but by noon, everyone was talking about what happened in the graveyard. Everyone went to the scene of the crime, even Tom and Huck. But they did not speak. They'd made a promise. In the crowd was Injun Joe and Muff Potter. Fingers pointed at Muff, but he said he did not do the crime. Sad, Muff told Joe to tell what had happened. Injun Joe lied about what had happened. He'd done the crime, but he put the blame on his friend. Do you feel what Injun Joe did to Muff was wrong? Well, Tom and Huck did not say anything. They'd made a promise. Everyone believed Injun Joe, and Muff was taken to jail. Chapter 5 is The Young Pirates. Tom missed Becky so much because she'd been so sick. He'd felt bad about what he'd done. Then one day she came back to school. He tried so hard to get her attention, but she ignored him. Tom showed off for Becky, but it still didn't work. How do you think Tom felt after this? Maybe sad? Maybe all alone? Well, then Tom decided to go exploring since nobody loved him. So Tom wanted to be a pirate. Joe, Tom's friend, decided to join Tom because he wanted to be a pirate. They decided to be pirates together. The two boys wanted to go find Jackson Island. They met up with Huck Finn, who always wanted a good adventure. Now Huck decided to go along to Jackson Island too. And at Jackson Island, the boys decided to go fishing. Remember, Tom wanted to be a pirate, so at Jackson Island, the boys enjoyed playing pirate games and making up passwords. They stole coal for their fire, and they stole bacon to eat. The boys were enjoying being pirates. They talked about how pirates take money, capture ships, and rescue women. Do you think Tom and his friends were having fun? And soon the boys got tired and drifted off to sleep. Well, that's the end of our first 5 chapters. If you wait around, there'll be another video for chapters 6 through 10. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Go check out my other videos. Thanks for stopping by.